the Mount Rushmores of wrestling, and how we have all these fun scenarios and all these fun categories and stuff. And the one that we're kind of talking about at the start, obviously, we just say who is the Mount Rushmore of wrestling. To me, I think that comes down to who has been like the biggest stars, who has drawn the most money, who has done the best for business, who has pulled in the most attendance, broken the most records, that sort of thing. And in my opinion, there is a correct answer for it, for the four names. Obviously, all other ones can be subjective and like a sort of, who are your favourites. But I think in terms of the fact of who are the four biggest superstars of all time, I think is the four I've written down. I don't know about you, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, although I think there's a good chance we have the same four, but there's one name in this who is definitely deserving, but could be subbed out for another name so there's one name, there's two people who I'm torn between, but I've settled on one of them, but I'll tell you who that is when we start to go through the actual list. So this is for male superstars, I take it.
Yeah, well, just male superstars, yes, but I just mean biggest stars ever. Like if a female could have fit into this category, that would have been fine, But I think that the four people who are on this list are four males, and I'll run through my one then. I think it is, of course, Hulk Hogan, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and John Cena. That's the correct answer for this category.
So I also have Hulk Hogan, The Rock, John Cena, and Stone Cold Steve Austin. However, let me explain. I nearly didn't have Cena on my list, only because I'm not sure who was bigger in their time, John Cena in his time, or Bruno Sammartino in his. Because Sammartino carried that company and he sold out the Garden for years and years and years, and he was the big superstar before Hulk Hogan. Sammartino was a mainstream star, and that's whenever I do this, whenever I think about this, that's the one that I have there's no question about Austin and Rock, even though they were the same era. They were both equally a huge draw, and The Rock has then gone on to transcend the business. Hogan is a pop culture icon. He is synonymous with the 1980s. He's not just a wrestling star, he is an 80s star. Cena is also a huge star, and the company probably wouldn't be as profitable now as it is had they not rode the wave of Cena and Cena merch and all of that stuff. And whether you love him or you hate him, he always got a reaction. I also just don't know enough about the Sammartino era to be confident.
Yeah, exactly.
But his importance just can't be understated, because it wasn't just the fact that he was the WWF champion for a long time, or he was the top guy in the WWF and then the WWF, but he was a huge nationwide star. He could travel the territories. He was a big name, so that's where I dither. I've settled on those four, the same as you, but Cena for me will always have an asterisk, because even though he's himself now transcending the wrestling industry, Sammartino to me is very deserving to be on that list too.
Okay, good shout. My argument towards it is Sammartino transcended the WWF, right? Which was back in the day when he was champion, was a territory-based business. So the WWF didn't run Georgia and didn't run Carolina and didn't run Canada. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In Cena's time, Cena sold out everywhere. You know what I mean? Cena was able to sell out Georgia and Carolina and all those places. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do think Cena does take one step further than Sammartino. Sammartino might have drawn more money, technically, but how much Sammartino merch was there? And also how accessible was the WWF on television? When Sammartino was there in the 70s. Whereas Cena, anytime Cena's on the show now, even 10 years after his prime or whatever, will still pop a massive rating. And the reason the rating stayed at 4s and 5s and 3.5s from 2005 to 2010, I think Cena's a large part of that.
Yeah.
Even though I do think Cena didn't quite reach his full maturation period till after 2010, when he became a legit sort of veteran, to the point where he's wrestling Kevin Owens and AJ Styles and stuff as the veteran, not just as John Cena. So and then of course social media and all that stuff. You know, I think social media is going to play a big part in that as well. Cena's going to transcend that. But I totally agree. I mean, Sammartino, it belongs on that list. But again, I don't know as much about Sammartino as John Cena. Of course I don't. I'm only 23 years of age. But you look back at the historical aspect of that and you see the amount of times he sold out Madison Square Garden, a place where no one sold out, you know? And Sammartino did that and, of course, was champion for 4 years. I don't know. I think Cena might take it for me. As you say, Hogan's an 80s icon. I'm watching that Netflix show Glow just now, you know, about the women's wrestling. And the first episode, the actor Ruth Wilder shows up to her audition. Little does she know it's a wrestling audition. And the guy says, okay, it's a wrestling show. And they all go, what, like Hulk Hogan?
Yeah.
Like everybody knew who Hulk Hogan was, you know? In the late 90s, everybody knew who The Rock was and everybody knew who Stone Cold was. But I'd almost argue, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'd argue that The Rock has become a bigger star than all of them.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, you wouldn't, at the time, you would think that Austin was just a wee nudge above The Rock and that annoyed The Rock. But now it's like, everybody knows The Rock. But if you've ever been a wrestling fan, you know Austin. But like, every wrestling fan's wife, dad, uncle, grandma, you know, all these people, everyone knows The Rock, you know? So I think that's my argument for those four. But I think Sammartino's got a good shout. I think Ric Flair has a shout too.
Yeah.
I think Shawn Michaels has a shout. I think Bret Hart has a shout. But I think these four are your picks.